Hi guys, my name is Stephanie and I am back with another DIY project. Today we're going to be replacing the caulk behind my kitchen sink with new caulking. Over the last year, the caulking behind my kitchen sink has started to fall apart and mildew has been building up in that gap. There tends to be a lot of water behind kitchen sinks, so the caulking can wear out a lot faster in those areas than it does in a dry area. For this quick project, I'll be using a utility knife, painter's tape, a caulking gun, and my favorite caulk, which is this GE Advanced Silicone Caulk. So it's 100% silicone. It's going to last a lot longer. It's non-paintable, so you can't use it on any of your wood surfaces. It's made for bathrooms and kitchens. I've tried a few other silicone caulks in the past, and I tell you what, this one actually looks a lot better than they normally do too. So I really like this one. I started by removing the old caulking that was left behind. A lot of it has already fallen out, and I've picked it free over the last year. But there is still a lot that needs to be removed, so I used the utility knife to remove that old caulking. Just be careful around your tile work, woodwork, or any countertops that could be scratched up by that knife. You want to just keep it in the caulking area, in that gap, nowhere else. When I'm removing old caulking, I like to run that knife along the bottom edge of that gap and then along the top edge of that gap. That's going to help free that caulking completely from the gap so you can clean it out. And I'm only removing the damaged caulking, but you could go and replace all of the caulking. This job actually doesn't take that long. I think this probably took me about 10 minutes to do this kitchen area that you see here. If you did the whole countertop, it would probably be 15-20 minutes. I've sped up this video in this section, but as you can see, it can take a lot of passes going back and forth trying to get all of that loose caulking out of the gap. You want to remove it all before you put the new caulking in. For one thing, it's going to help you get out any moisture that might be trapped in there. But also if there's any mildew built up, you're going to get that out when you remove the old caulking. And you also want to make sure you don't have little bits of the old caulk in your new caulking, or it's going to make that nice, pretty smooth line look bumpy. So once I've cleared out the majority of the caulking with that utility knife, I grab an old toothbrush and I start scrubbing that gap to clean out any little bits that are left behind still. After scrubbing most of those little bits out, I grab some rubbing alcohol. So this is normal rubbing alcohol from your pharmacy or grocery store. And I use that to clean out the gap. So again, I'm getting rid of the mildew that I know was behind the sink area, but I'm also using that rubbing alcohol to clean the area free of any grease and oils that might have built up over the years. You want that area to be really clean when you're putting the new caulking in so that the caulking can really stick to your countertop or tile. Rubbing alcohol is also great for this job because it evaporates pretty quickly. Water, if you were going to use water to clean that gap, you might be introducing more water into the gap that would take a lot longer to dry out. So the rubbing alcohol evaporates nice and quick. It doesn't leave any residue behind and it removes that grease and oil. So definitely use that. Don't go for soaps or water or anything to do this job. After cleaning that area really well with that rubbing alcohol, I moved on to using my blow dryer. Using a blow dryer is probably the fastest way to dry out that opening. Using a little heat and that high wind from a blow dryer dries out that area so well. I had to do this job in my bathroom recently and I was blowing out little bits of water. There was so much water built up in the gap behind my bathroom sink. So it's worth doing the blow dryer. If you don't have a blow dryer, use a little fan or wait a couple days to make sure that the area is completely dry before you apply your new caulk. Of course, you have to keep that opening dry for that couple of days before you move on. After drying out that area, I move on to applying painter's tape to that opening that I'm going to be applying new caulk to. The pros might not need to use painter's tape, but I find that when you're only doing caulking jobs like this once every 2 or 3 years, it really helps you to get nice, crisp, clean lines, and there's a lot less mess to clean up. It's going to all be on that painter's tape, and then you just peel it away. To have nice, thin caulk lines that look professional, you want to make sure that you're basically leaving only the gap open for the caulking to go into. I'll show you a close-up of it. Here's a closer look at my finished tape lines. As you can see, there is not much to that opening. It's just the opening and a tiny bit of the backsplash and a tiny bit of the countertop that's ready for me to apply the caulk. I use my finger when I'm smoothing caulking, so I always use a wet rag so that I can keep cleaning my finger and keep it moist with that wet rag. I apply a 1 to 2 foot long line of the caulking, and then I use my finger, a wet fingertip, to smooth that caulking and push it into the gap as I'm smoothing it out. Using a wet finger helps your finger glide across that caulking without too much of that caulking sticking to your finger. Wipe off the excess caulking onto the rag as you go to make sure it doesn't get left behind and get really messy. So I went over this caulking a few times, and each time I was pushing that caulking into the gap and smoothing it out as I went. So I wanted to make sure I had the perfect amount of caulking left behind in that gap, not too much, not too little. Once you finish applying the caulking, you can remove the tape. So you want to remove the tape before it has a chance to dry. Don't forget your caulking is going to dry within 30 minutes. Your painter's tape will have a lot of caulking residue left behind on it, so you want to make sure that you carefully lift that painter's tape away without letting it touch your backsplash or your countertop, or it will leave some of that silicone behind you'll have to clean off later. After I remove that painter's tape, I grab my wet rag one more time, get my finger wet, and smooth out that caulk line one last time. That'll smooth out any edges left behind by that painter's tape and give it a nice professional look. Okay, now here's a closer look at that finished caulk line. As you can see, it's really hard to see that white caulking here. So if you're using white countertops, you want to use white caulking. Any other color, you're going to go with a clear caulking. Even with having to move a camera around the whole time, I think this job took me about 15 minutes. So it's super easy. Don't be intimidated by this. You can do this work yourself and save yourself a lot of money. As always, if you have any questions, put them in the comments below. I do try to answer them whenever I get a chance. And that's it, guys. Good luck with your project.